This man you're looking at on screen was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. So when authorities asked, "What do you identify as?" he says, "Whatever puts me in a woman's prison," because he's got to spend the rest of his life there. So they take his word for it, put him in a woman's prison, and now all of his cellmates wind up pregnant. And his response is, he's not a man, he's a lesbian. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the channel. My name is Nate the Lawyer, where we look at the craziest stories here on the internet. And boy, do I got a crazy story for you today. This is Tremaine Carroll. Now, he's a central figure in this case. He is a biological male who began identifying as a woman in 2021. And that date is pretty important. See, in January 2021, California allowed inmates to be placed in a facility corresponding with the sex that they identify with.
So California passed Senate Bill 132, which allows incarcerated, transgender, non-binary, and intersex men to be transferred into women's prisons. You know, we've been having this ongoing national discussion about protections of women with the transgender advocacy. And I think one of the big places that I guess maybe many in the nation forgot to look at was our prisons. And then we hear about the Senate bill, which has been signed into law.
So what that wonderful California law did was say, hey, we're going to ask the person, what do you identify as? And if they say we identify as a woman, no questions asked, we're sending you to a woman's prison. So now that brings us back to Tremaine Carroll. See, he was serving a 25 to life sentence under California's 3 strikes law. See, in 1990, Carroll pleaded guilty to 2 counts of kidnapping for ransom. And then 7 years later, he pleaded guilty for being the getaway driver in a robbery. Now, along with his previous felonies, this made him eligible for a life sentence, and he was given a life sentence. Now, fast forward to 2021, and California has just passed this new law that essentially says, we're going to take your word for it. If you say you identify as a woman, we're going to put you in a woman's prison. So guess what Carroll said? I identify as a woman, and please put me in a woman's prison so I can serve out the rest of my term, which was a life sentence.
Carroll was allowed to serve time in a women's prison despite being a biological male because of Senate Bill 132, the Transgender Respect Agency and Dignity Act, which took effect in 2021. It allows inmates to be housed with the gender they identify as. The CDCR website points out state law prohibits discrimination based on gender identity.
There's no psychological evaluation that needs to be done. This person doesn't need to be on cross-gender hormones. They don't need to be signed up for transgender surgery. They don't even need a significant psychological evaluation regarding gender confusion. The mere statement is enough.
You heard that right. The mere statement is enough. So when the state of California started asking grown men, would you rather be in a prison with all men or would you rather be in a prison with all women? Most of them started saying they were women, they identified as women, and they would like to be placed in women's prison. Here's one guy who was convicted of murdering 3 people. Guess what he identified as?
When Dana Rivers, born David Warfield, brutally murdered a married lesbian couple and their adopted son in their Oakland, California home. Prosecutors say Rivers shot all 3 victims as they slept, stabbing one of the women more than 40 times. Last year, 7 years after the murders, Rivers was found guilty and last month sentenced to more than 150 years in prison. Her choice, the Central California Women's Facility, a prison housing more than 2,300 women and sparking outrage among some activists.
Dana Rivers is a man, and it is the position of Women's Declaration International globally that it's inappropriate to house male prisoners with female prisoners.
This was California. They didn't care about any logic, reason, science. If you tell them you're a woman, they're going to treat you like a woman, and for all intensive purposes, you are a woman. Now, because of this law, Carroll decided, hey, I'm going to live my true life as a lesbian woman. So Carroll told both the court and the state that he identifies as a woman. The authorities in the state of California followed state law and put Carroll in a women's prison. Now, here is a former inmate in the women's prison telling you about the living conditions in the prison.
Well, I spent 5 years inside that prison, so I'm pretty well informed as far as how it works. This is a place that has 8-person cells. So there's 4 bunks, and everybody has to cohabitate like that. There is no privacy. There's no downtime. You're not alone. 8 people sharing the living space, which is about 6 feet, sharing a toilet, a shower, and 2 sinks.
So they took this biological man, put him in a cell with 7 women, and what do you think happened? Well, there were a lot of pregnancies.
After his first cellmate became pregnant and was moved to Los Angeles, 2 other cellmates of his complained that he had raped them. So we have filed rape charges against this inmate.
So now Carroll is on his 4th strike because he's being charged with all of these other crimes concerning his fellow inmates. Now, Carroll was facing another life sentence for the assault of his fellow inmates. But he had one request of this court. He told the judge that he wanted to only be referred to as she or her. That's because state law demanded it. And filed a motion with the court to demand that the prosecutor and all the witnesses refer to Carroll as she, her, even though he is a biological male. Here's how the judge ruled.
A controversial court ruling tonight. A convicted criminal who served time at the women's prison in Chowchilla is charged with raping fellow inmates. A Madera County judge says Tremaine Carroll must be referred to with she, her pronouns. But the district attorney is pushing back because the 52-year-old Carroll is a biological male, and the decision could impact the pursuit of justice.
A Madera County judge ruled this week 52-year-old state prisoner Tremaine Carroll must be referred to with she, her pronouns because Carroll identifies as a woman. But the district attorney believes the defendant is abusing the system.
This is a person who's not a woman in any sense of the word.
Moreno says the ruling regarding pronouns impacts her ability to prosecute the case.
This is a particular issue in this case because it's confusing to the jury.
It's just absolutely insane that a victim would have to get on the stand and police their pronouns and their usage when trying to recite one of the most scariest times in their lives.
Now, if you're like me, you think, hey, that's insane old California. You know how progressive and liberal they are. Let them have their madness. But this is actually not just limited to California. This is what happened in the state of New Jersey.
2 female inmates at a supposedly all-women's prison in New Jersey have just become pregnant. You wonder how that happened. Well, it turns out those women had sexual encounters with another inmate who was a biological man passing as a woman. Now, some people predicted that this would happen, and they were laughed at, mocked, and attacked as bigots.
In 2021, New Jersey enforced a policy that allowed inmates to be housed based on the gender in which they were identified with. Now, it used to be a time when it was based on their genitalia.
Right.
And then they changed
Right.
it. So, ladies, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's tricky.
Now, I'm here to tell you, I don't think this is tricky at all. Now think about this. 1/3 of the men requesting transfer to California's women's prisons are sex offenders. And at the federal level, 50% of the men in federal prisons who identify as women are also sex offenders. And those numbers are from the California Department of Corrections and this FOIA request from the federal government. Now we have to just keep it 100% real here, right? This is utterly ridiculous. Placing men who happen to be sex offenders in women's prisons, that just makes absolutely no sense. What did they think was going to happen? Anyone could have predicted this if you just had half a brain. And this, I think, is the problem, is that we've gone too far one way to where it's now becoming ridiculous. Like essentially having men compete with women in women's sports, now just placing male sex offenders in women's prisons. This is utterly madness. And I feel like I'm living in a world where I just don't understand why rational, sane people would do things like this. Just tell the prison that you're a woman and they'll treat you as a woman. That's insane old stuff. But that's what's happening in California. Now, if you happen to disagree with my assessment of this particular issue and my views on the entire trans issue in general, please let me know in the comment section. Tell me where I'm mistaken in the comment section. Because just like biological men competing with biological women in elite sports is ridiculous and nonsense, I think this too is ridiculous and nonsense. And I think that's the reason why Harris lost the election in such a dramatic way, because at a certain point, you can't fool everyone all the time, and people aren't going to go with the nonsense all the time. And eventually, you're going to run up against something. Remember that Trump ad? She's for they, them, I'm for you. That's what this is about. And for those women who are in prisons, remember, what was it, like 8 women in a cell? So if you take out one of those women and put a man there, that's great for men. Matter of fact, you probably have men who are not in prison now who would love to go to prison and be locked in a cell with 8 women for the rest of their lives. That would be heaven to some men. I understand now why 10 counties in California flipped for Donald Trump, because what's happening out there is lunacy. Let's just call it what it is, lunacy. So if you're listening to my voice right now and haven't subscribed to the channel, I don't know what to tell you. You love these videos, but just hit the bell. 70% of you haven't subscribed. So just one of you just need to hit the bell, and we are on our way to 1 million. Don't forget, again, like, share, and subscribe. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.